There was a time that I publicly called every single girl at my school ugly. And let me just tell you, that's not the way that you make friends or get people to like you. You see, ever since I was a little boy, I always had a penchant for making people laugh. And this started super early on, even with my own family. I remember mom telling me that I could be an actor or a comedian, something to entertain people and just make them laugh because I love to do that. So I really took that to heart, taking a lot of inspiration from the entertainers that I would see, like the clowns at the circus when we went for the very first time. I remember watching the crowd react to the clown's skit and just how much people were laughing, and I just couldn't wait to come back home and then put on my own clown show for the rest of the family. I remember the excitement and the rush, just even performing for my own family. Coming up with the skit and the routine that I was gonna do, thinking about what the reactions were gonna be, and then finally seeing it. It was just so fun being entertaining, putting together and planning the gags and the skits, and then finally performing them and just feeling that sense of satisfaction, being able to elicit that joy and laughter from my own family members. It really was foundational for me to realize just how much laughter could bring joy into people's lives, and just how much being funny could lift people's moods and really bring people together. And you know, back then, the comedy was pretty innocent. You know, I was just a kid, so most of it was slapstick humor, often at my own expense, consisting of a lot of me falling down or me failing at something, or just me being a klutz overall. But what I didn't realize at the time was, although this type of self-deprecating slapstick humor was relatively basic, it was actually very wholesome. It was all at my own expense, nobody's feelings got hurt, and everybody was just there to enjoy the show and have a good time. But that wouldn't be the way my sense of humor would remain, especially when I realized that humor and being funny was a great way of becoming popular and being liked. Fast forward to elementary school when I was running for student body president. I remember the distinct realization that this wasn't a contest of qualifications for office, but it was in fact a popularity contest. And if I could just make everybody laugh, there's probably a pretty good chance that I could win this. It just so happened that I was running against my friend Trevor, whose mom was the president of the PTA. And so when it came to the speeches in front of the whole school, to this day I still don't know if Trevor wrote his own speech, because it definitely sounded like his mom had a hand in it. As I shared in a past video, it was one of the most polished, well-written speeches I had ever heard. And he could probably even use pieces of it today if he were running for president of the United States. I mean, he was making campaign promises like, we'll raise the number of books that you can check out from the library from 2 to 3. I remember sitting there listening to it thinking, gosh, Trevor, I know that you're reading at like an 8th grade level, but this is not relatable to the rest of these kids. And so when it came to my speech, I went in the opposite direction. I tried so hard to make the student body laugh. There wasn't one line in my entire speech that wasn't related to pee or poo or diarrhea somehow, claiming that I was qualified for the position because my farts were the smelliest and the loudest. And you know, the most impressive thing about all of this was the teachers just let me go on and on without stopping me. They sat there as I went on about taking field trips to the dump and farting on homework. I mean, the entire speech could really be summed up as a bad case of the runs. And so as you guys could have guessed it, I ended up winning that election for student body president by a landslide. And it just really cemented in my mind the power of humor and just how important it was to be funny in order to be liked. And so you can imagine how satisfying it was to me when in my 6th grade yearbook at the end of the year, I was named best humor and also most likely to become a comedian. This desire for popularity and relevance through humor continued to grow, especially when I was in high school. It was around that time when blogging first started becoming a thing that I had a Zanga that I used to post funny things to. It started off as me just posting funny snippets of conversations that I had with friends, but then later turned into a full-on humor blog where I would write these articles and illustrate them with pictures that some of you are used to seeing. And I found that the more that I included funny pictures and started talking about relevant topics like relationships and girls, the more popular the Zanga was getting. Like what you're seeing here, why it's difficult for guys to approach girls. Or this one, why guys should chase girls, which eventually turned into a YouTube video, one of my very first ones. Or why purses represent girl superficiality because what's on the outside is worth more than what it's carrying on the inside. But I was low-key proud of what my Zanga was turning into, especially when people at school would approach me, tell me that they read my latest article and laugh about it with me. And it really started driving my popularity. It all culminated for me at one of the Friday night football games. You see, the night before, my friend and I were chatting on AOL Instant Messenger about girls that weren't part of our usual social circles. And yes, back then we actually had to sit down at our computers and sign on to AIM in order to talk to each other. But in the course of that conversation, we discussed this one popular Hoppa girl, Christina Lee, wondering if she would be at the football game the next day. Without thinking much of it, I just so happened to include a snippet of that conversation that included her name in the Zanga blog that I published that night. And so imagine my surprise when the very next night, my group of friends and I are all sitting in the bleachers, and Christina Lee and her group of friends happen to walk by. She makes eye contact with me and says, "I saw your Zanga post." I mean, looking back, it's a dumb high school thing, but I can't lie. In that moment, I felt like a king. After saying that to me, she smiled and she walked away, and my group of friends were going crazy. Just all absolutely blown away that one, Christina Lee actually talked to me first, and two, that Christina Lee actually read my Zanga. And so truth be told, after graduation and heading into college, my small Zanga following and my Zanga stardom was something that I really carried with me as a thing of pride. And so right here, I just need to mention a quick tangent. You see, at this point, a lot of my posts on my Zanga were about relationships, and a lot of my friends were giving me a really hard time for choosing to go into engineering school, since a lot of them were headed to business school, and they made it an express point to me that there were no girls in engineering school, repeatedly pointing out to me that it was relationship suicide, and that I was heading into a lonely and dry time in my life. And so here it kind of became a meme before memes were even a thing, that Frank was going to go into engineering school and basically end up single for the rest of his life because he chose to study engineering. And so whether I wanted to or not, I ended up internalizing that. And the very first week of school in this exact dorm room on that exact computer, I wrote a Zanga blog titled "Engineering Girls Are the Ugliest," complete with this illustration as the opening picture, with the caption, "Why is it that all engineering girls look like this?" It was truly a bad case of just trying way too hard to be funny. Repeatedly calling my women engineering classmates ugly for the sake of a few internet points. And thinking back, the only thing that was ugly was my delusion that this was somehow good comedy that was worth posting. And long story short, to this day, I still don't know if any of them actually saw it. But what I can tell you is the very first couple weeks of class, nobody talked to me. There were instances where I'd go out of my way to say hi to some of them, and they wouldn't even respond. So again, I don't know if any of them actually saw it, but I would be surprised because I deserved it. These days, I'm just so blown away by how immature and how foolish I once was, especially as I've had the opportunity to guide the next generation of engineers, a lot of them women, to the fields of science and technology, and especially at work where I'm just stunned by the sheer intelligence and talent of all these women that I get the privilege to work with, who step up in a challenging environment day after day, and especially whom I get the privilege to call friends. And so that's just what I wanted to leave with you guys today. Don't let your biases and assumptions, and especially your stereotypes of other people, get in the way, particularly of your respect for them. And always think twice and consider the consequences of anything that you say about somebody else, because one day you could be working for them.